Hey everybody, this is Allison from Allykatkreations. How are you? Try not to freak out about my situation. I put 2 oracle readings up for anybody that is interested in finding out about star seeds and those of us in the struggle. But right now, I'm going to continue reading Carlos Castaneda. I'm going to focus on one chapter because we're almost at the near of this book. It's a long chapter, but we're getting there, and the goodies that keep coming out of this book just doesn't stop. Please make sure to hit that like button, to subscribe if you haven't done so already, and share with those who could use this information to help them transform themselves in the dark night of the soul and or just awakening. Mud shadows. I wonder what this is going to bring to us. To sit in silence with Don Juan was one of the most enjoyable experiences I knew. We were comfortably sitting on some stuffed chairs in the back of the house, in the mountains of central Mexico. It was late afternoon. There was a pleasant breeze. The sun was behind the house at our backs. Its fading light created exquisite shades of green in the big trees in the backyard. There were big trees growing around his house and beyond it, which obliterated the sight of the city where he lived. This always gave me the impression that I was in the wilderness, a different wilderness than the barren Sonora Desert, but wilderness nonetheless. Today we're going to discuss a serious topic in sorcery, Don Juan said abruptly, and we're going to begin by talking about the energy body. He had described the energy body to me countless times, saying that it was a conglomerate of energy fields, the mirror image of the conglomerate of energy fields that makes up the physical body when it is seen as energy that flows in the universe. He had said that it was smaller, more compact, and of heavier appearance than the luminous spheres of the physical body. Don Juan had explained that the body and the energy body were 2 conglomerate of energy fields compressed together by some strange organizing force. He had emphasized no end that the force that binds that group of energy fields together was, according to the sorcerers of ancient Mexico, the most mysterious force in the universe. His personal estimation was that it was the pure essence of the entire cosmos, the sum total of everything there is. He had asserted that the physical body and the energy body were the only counterbalanced energy configurations in our realm as human beings. He accepted, therefore, no other dualism than the one between these two. The dualism between body and mind, spirit and flesh, he considered to be mere concretion of the mind emanating from it without any energetic foundation. Don Juan had said that by means of discipline, it is possible for anyone to bring the energy body closer to the physical body. Normally, the distance between the two is enormous. Once the energy body is within a certain range, which varies for each of us individually, anyone through discipline can forge it into the exact replica of their physical body. That is to say, a 3-dimensional solid being. Hence the sorcerer's idea of the other or the double. By the same token, through the same process of discipline, anyone can forge their 3-dimensional solid physical body to be a perfect replica of their energy body. That is to say, an ethereal charge of energy invisible to the human eye, as all energy is. When Don Juan had told me all about this, my reaction had been to ask him if he was describing a mystical proposition. He had replied that there was nothing mystical about sorcerers. Sorcerers were practical beings, and what they described was always something quite sober and down to earth. According to Don Juan, the difficulty in understanding what sorcerers did was that they proceeded from a different cognitive system. Sitting at the back of his house in central Mexico that day, Don Juan said that the energy body was of key importance in whatever was taking place in my life. He saw that it was an energetic fact that the energy body, instead of moving away from me, as it normally happens, was approaching me with great speed. What does it mean that it's approaching me, Don Juan? I asked. It means that something is going to knock the daylights out of you, he said, smiling. A tremendous degree of control is going to come into your body and into your life, but not your control, the energy body's control. Do you mean, Don Juan, that some outside force will control me? I asked. There are scores of outside forces controlling you at this moment, Don Juan replied. The control that I'm referring to is something outside the domain of language. It is your control, and at the same time, it is not. It cannot be classified, but it can certainly be experienced, and above all, it can certainly be manipulated. Remember this, it can be manipulated to your total advantage, of course, which again is not your advantage, but the energy body's advantage. However, the energy body is you. So we could go on forever like dogs biting their own tails trying to describe this. Language is inadequate. All these experiences are beyond syntax. Darkness had descended very quickly, and the foliage of the trees that had been glowing green a little while before was now very dark and heavy. Don Juan said that if I had paid close attention to the darkness of the foliage without focusing my eyes, but sort of looked at it from the corner of my eye, I would see a fleeting shadow crossing my field of vision. This is the appropriate time of day for doing what I'm asking you to do, he said. It takes a moment to engage the necessary attention in you to do it. Don't stop until you catch the fleeting black shadow. I did see some strange fleeting black shadow projected on the foliage of the trees. It was either one shadow going back and forth or various fleeting shadows moving from left to right or right to left or straight up in the air. They look like fat black fish to me. Enormous fish. It was as if gigantic swordfish were flying in the air. I was engrossed in the sight. Then finally, it scared me. It became too dark to see the foliage, yet I could see the fleeting black shadows. What is it, Don Juan? I asked. I see fleeting black shadows all over the place. Ah, that's the universe at large, he said. Incommensurable, non-linear, outside the realm of syntax. The sorcerers of ancient Mexico were the first ones to see these fleeting shadows, so they followed them around. They saw them as you're seeing them, and they saw them as energy that flows in the universe. And they did discover something transcendental. He stopped talking and looked at me. He paused his pauses were perfectly placed. He stopped talking when I was hanging by a thread. What did they discover, Don Juan? I asked. They discovered that we have a companion for life, he said, as clearly as he could. We have a predator that came from the depths of the cosmos and took over the rule of our lives. Human beings are its prisoners. The predator is our Lord and Master. It has rendered us docile, helpless. If we went to protest, it suppresses our protest. If we want to act independently, it deems that we do not do so. It was very dark around us, and that seemed to curtail any expression on my part. If it had been daylight, I would have laughed my head off. In the dark, I felt quite inhibited. It's pitch black around us, Don Juan said, but if you look out of the corner of your eyes, you will still see fleeting shadows jumping all around you. He was right, I could see them. Their movement made me dizzy. Don Juan turned on the light, and that seemed to dissipate everything. You have arrived by your effort alone to what the shamans of ancient Mexico called the topic of topics, Don Juan said. I have been beating around the bush all this time, insinuating to you that something is holding us prisoner. Indeed, as we are held prisoner, this was an energetic fact from the sorcerers of ancient Mexico. Why has the predator taken over in the fashion that you are describing, Don Juan? I asked. There must be a logical explanation. There is an explanation, Don Juan replied, which is the simplest explanation in the world. They took over because we are food for them. And they squeeze us mercilessly because we are their subsistence. Just as we rear chicken in chicken coops, galineros, the predators rear us in human coops, humaneros. Therefore, their food is always available to them. If you are listening to this and you go back into what I did yesterday, the gray agenda, you will learn that the Dracos and some of the grays siphon humaneros energy called loosh, and they literally cannibalize us like we slaughter chickens and cows. How appropriate. It's true though. I felt that my head was shaking violently from side to side. I could not express my profound sense of unease and discontentment, but my body moved to bring it to the surface. I shook from head to toe without any volition on my part. No, 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 I heard myself saying. That is absurd, Don Juan. What are you saying? Is something monstrous? It simply can't be true, for sorcerers are for just average men or for anyone. Why not? Don Juan asked calmly. Why not? Because it infuriates you? Yes, it infuriates me, I retorted. Those claims are monstrous. Well, he said, you haven't heard all the claims yet. Wait a bit longer and see how you feel. I'm going to subject you to a blitz. That is, I'm going to subject your mind to tremendous onslaughts, and you cannot get up and leave because you're caught. Not because I'm holding you prisoner, because something in you will prevent you from leaving, while another part of you is going to go truthfully berserk. So brace yourself. There was something in me which was, I felt, glutton for punishment. He was right. I didn't have left the house for the world, and yet I didn't like one bit the inanities he was spouting. I wanted to appeal to another analytical mind, Don Juan said. Think for a moment and tell me how you would explain the contradiction between intelligence of man and the engineer and stupidity of his systems of belief, or the stupidity of his contradictory behavior. Sorcerers believe that the predators have given us our systems of beliefs, our ideas of good and evil, our social mores. They are the ones who set up our hopes and expectations and dreams of success or failure. They have given us covertness, greed, and cowardice. It is the predators who make us complacent, routinary, and egomaniacal. But how can they do this, Don Juan? I asked, somehow angered further by what he was saying. Do they whisper all that in our ears while we sleep? No, they don't do it that way. That's idiotic, Don Juan said, smiling. They are infinitely more efficient and organized than that. In order to keep us obedient and meek and weak, the predators engage themselves in a stupendous maneuver, stupendous, of course, from the point of view of a fighting strategist. A horrendous maneuver from the point of view of those who suffer it. They gave us their mind. Do you hear me? The predators gave us their mind, which becomes our mind. The predator's mind is baroque, contradictory, morose, full with the fear of being discovered any minute now. We have a reptilian part of our brains. I know that even though you have never suffered hunger, he went on, you have food anxiety, which is none other than the anxiety of the predator who fears that any moment now its maneuver is going to be uncovered and food is going to be denied. Through the mind, which after all is their mind, the predators inject into the lives of human beings whatever is convenient for them. And they ensure in this manner a degree of security to act as a buffer against their fear. It's not that I can't accept all this at face value, Don Juan. I said, I could, but there's something so odious about it that it actually repels me. It forces me to take a contradictory stand. If it's true that they eat us, how do they do it? Don Juan had a broad smile on his face. He was as pleased as Punch. He explained the sorcerers see infant humans beings as strange luminous balls of energy covered from the top to the bottom with a glowing coat, something like a plastic cover that is adjusted tightly over their cocoon of energy. He said that the glowing coat of awareness was what the predators consumed, and that when a human being reached adulthood, all that was left of the glowing coat of awareness was a narrow fringe that went from the ground to the top of the toes. The fringe permitted mankind to continue living, but only barely. In all seriousness, this is extremely true. Our government sold us out as commodities. They traffic pandas, the panda eyes, not the makeup I wear, but like blacked out on. That's how they take their energy. This is the war that we're fighting right now. This is the reason why I'm reading this book. To have more people exposed to the awareness that this actually literally goes on, and it continues to go on until we all put a stop to it and recognize it for what it is. It is a horrible thing. And these predators do it constantly. That's what they feed off of. It's called loosh. It's real. This really does happen. As if I had been in a dream, I heard Don Juan Matias explaining that, to his knowledge, man was the only species that had the glowing coat of awareness outside this luminous cocoon. Therefore, he became easy prey for an awareness of different order, such as the heavy awareness of the predator. He then made the most damaging statement he had made so far. He said that this narrow fringe of awareness was the epicenter of a self-reflection where man was irremediable caught. By playing on our self-reflection, which is the only point of awareness left to us, the predators create flares of awareness that they proceed to consume in a ruthless, predatory fashion. They give us inane problems that force those flares of awareness to rise. And in this manner, they keep us alive in order for them to feed with the energy flare of our pseudo concerns. There must have been something to what Don Juan was saying, which was so devastating to me that at that point I actually got sick to my stomach. After a moment's pause, long enough for me to recover, I asked Don Juan, but why is it that sorcerers of ancient Mexico and all sorcerers today, although they see the predators, don't do anything about it? There's nothing that you and I can do about it, Don Juan said in a grave, sad voice. All we can do is discipline ourselves to the point where they will not touch us. How can you ask your fellow men to go through those rigors of discipline? They laugh and make fun of you, and more aggressive ones will beat the shit out of you. And not so much because they don't believe it. Down in the depths of every human being, there is an ancestral, visceral knowledge about the predator's existence. My analytical mind swung back and forth like a yo-yo. It left me and came back, and left me and came back again. Whatever Don Juan was proposing was preposterous and incredible. After the same time, it was most reasonable thing, so simple. It explained every kind of human contradiction I could think of. But how could one have taken all this seriously? Don Juan was pushing me into the path of an avalanche that would take me down forever. I felt another wave of threatening sensation. The wave didn't stem from me, yet it was attached to me. Don Juan was doing something to me, mysteriously positive and terribly negative at the same time. I sensed it as an attempt to cut a thin film that seemed to be glue to me. His eyes were fixed on mine in an unblinking stare. He moved his eyes away and began to talk without looking at me anymore. Whatever doubt plagues you to a dangerous point, he said, doing something pragmatic about it. Turn off the light, pierce the darkness, find out what you can see. He got up to turn off the lights. I stopped him. No, Don Juan, I said, don't turn off the lights. I'm doing okay. What I felt then was a most unusual for me fear of the darkness. The mere thought of it made me pant. I definitely knew something viscerally, but I wouldn't dare touch it or bring it to the surface, not in a million years. You saw the fleeting shadows against the trees, Don Juan said, sitting back against his chair. That's pretty good. I like you to see them inside this room. You're not seeing anything. You're just merely catching fleeting images. You have done enough energy for that. I fear that Don Juan would get up anyway and turn off the lights, which he did. 2 seconds later, I was screaming my head off. Not only did I catch a glimpse of those fleeting images, I heard them buzzing by my ear. Don Juan doubled up with laughter as he turned on the lights. What a temperamental fellow, he said. A total disbeliever on the one hand and total pragmatist on the other. You must arrange this internal fight. Otherwise, you're going to swell up like a big toad and burst. Don Juan kept on pushing his barb deeper and deeper into me. The sorcerers of ancient Mexico, he said, saw the predator. They called it the flyer because it leaps through the air. It is not a pretty sight. It is a big shadow, impenetrably dark, a dark black shadow that jumps through the air. Then it lands flat on the ground. The sorcerers of ancient Mexico were quite ill at the ease with the idea when it made an appearance on Earth. They reasoned that man must have been complete being at one point, with stupendous insights, feats of awareness that are mythological legends nowadays. And then everything seems to disappear, and we have now a sedated man. Yep. I wanted to get angry, call him a paranoiac, but somehow the righteousness that was usually just underneath the surface of my being wasn't there. Something in me was beyond the point of asking myself my favorite question. What if all that he said is true? At the moment he was talking to me that night, in my heart of hearts, I felt that all of what he was saying was true. But at the same time, and with equal force, all that he was saying was absurdity itself. What are you saying, Don Juan? I asked feebly. My throat was constricted. I could hardly breathe. What I am saying is that what we have against us is not a simple predator. It is very smart and organized. It follows methodical system to render us useless. Man, the magical being that he is destined to be, is no longer magical. He's an average piece of meat. There are no more dreams for man but the dreams of an animal who is being raised to become a piece of meat, trite and conventional, imbecilic. Don Juan's words were elicting a strange bodily reaction in me, comparable to the sensation of nausea. It was as if I were going to get sick to my stomach again, but the nausea was coming from the bottom of my being, from the marrow of my bones. I convulsed involuntarily. Don Juan shook me by the shoulders forcefully. I felt my neck wobbling back and forth under the impact of his grip. The maneuver calmed me down at once. I felt more in control. Predator, Don Juan said, which of course is an inorganic being, is not altogether invisible to us, as other inorganic beings are. I think as children, we do see it and decide it's so horrific that we don't want to think about it. Children, of course, could insist on focusing on the sight, but everybody else around them dissuades them from doing so. The only alternative left for mankind, he continued, is discipline. Discipline is the only deterrent. By discipline, I don't mean harsh routines. I don't mean waking up every morning at 5:30 and throwing cold water over yourself until you're blue. Sorcerers understand discipline as the capacity to face with serenity odds that are not included in our expectations. For them, discipline is an art, the art of facing infinity without flinching, not because they are strong and taught, but because they are filled with awe. In what way would the sorcerer's discipline be a deterrent? I asked. Sorcerers say the discipline makes the glowing coat of awareness unpalpable to the flyer, Don Juan said, scrutinizing my face as if to discover any signs of disbelief. The result is the predators become bewildered. An ineligible glowing coat of awareness is not part of their cognition, I suppose. After being bewildered, they don't have any recourse other than refraining from continuing their nefarious tasks. If the predators don't eat our glowing coat of our awareness for a while, he went on, it'll keep on growing, simplifying the matter to the extreme. I could say that sorcerers, by means of their discipline, push the predators away long enough to allow their glowing coat of our awareness to grow beyond the level of the toes. Once it goes beyond the level of the toes, it grows back to its natural size. The sorcerers of ancient Mexico used to say that the glowing coat of awareness is like a tree. It is not pruned, it grows to its natural size and volume. As awareness reaches levels higher than the toes, tremendous maneuvers of perception become a matter of course. The grand trick of those sorcerers of ancient times, Don Juan continued, was to burden the flyer's mind with discipline. They found out that if they taxed the flyer's mind with inner silence, the foreign installation would flee, giving to any one of the practitioners involved in this maneuver the total certainty of the mind's foreign origin. The foreign installation comes back, I assure you, but not as strong, and a process begins in which the fleeing of this flyer's mind becomes routine until one day it flees permanently. A sad day indeed. That's the day when you have to rely on your own devices, which are nearly zero. There's no one to tell you what to do. There's no mind of foreign origin to dictate the imbecilities you've accustomed to. My teacher, the Nagual Julian, used to warn all his disciples, Don Juan continued, that this was the toughest day in a sorcerer's life. For the real mind that belongs to us, the sum total of our experience after a lifetime of domination, has been rendered shy, insecure, and shifty. Personally, I would say that the real battle of sorcerers beginnings at that moment. The rest is merely preparation. I became genuinely agitated. I wanted to know more, and yet a strange feeling in me clamored for me to stop. It allured to dark results and punishment, something like the wrath of God descending on me for tampering with something veiled by God himself. I made a supreme effort to allow my curiosity to win. What do you mean? I heard myself say, by taxing the flyer's mind. Discipline taxes the foreign mind no end, he replied. So through their discipline, sorcerers banished the foreign installation. I was overwhelmed by this statement. I believed that Don Juan was either certifiably insane or that he was telling me something so awesome that it froze everything in me. I noticed, however, how quickly I rallied my energy to deny everything he had said. After an instant of panic, I began to laugh, as if Don Juan had told me a joke. I even heard myself saying, Don Juan, you're incorrigible. Don Juan seemed to understand everything I was experiencing. He shook his head from side to side and raised his eyes to the heavens in a gesture of mock despair. I am so incorrigible, he said, that I'm going to give you the flyer's mind, which you carry inside you, one more jolt. I'm going to reveal to you one of the most extraordinary secrets of sorcery. I am going to describe to you a finding that took sorcerers thousands of years to verify and consolidate. He, looking at me, and smiled maliciously. The flyer's mind flees forever, he said. When sorcerers succeed in grabbing onto the vibrating force that holds us together as a conglomerate of energy fields. If a sorcerer maintains the pressure long enough, the flyer's mind flees in defeat. And that's exactly what you're going to do. Hold on to the energy that binds you together. I had the most inexplicable reaction I could have imagined. Something in me actually shook as if I had received a jolt. I entered into a state of unwarranted fear, which I immediately associated with my religious background. Don Juan looked at me from head to toe. You are fearing the wrath of God, aren't you? He said. Rest assured that that's not your fear. It's the flyer's fear, because he knows that you will do exactly as I'm telling you. His words did not calm me at all. I felt worse. I was actually convulsing involuntarily, and I had no means to stop it. Don't worry, Don Juan said calmly. I know for a fact that those attacks were off very quickly. The flyer's mind has no concentration whatsoever. After a moment, everything stopped as Don Juan had predicted. To say again that I was bewildered as it is a euphemism. The first time ever with Don Juan, or alone in my life, that I didn't know whether I was coming or going. I wanted to get out of the chair and walk around, but I was deathly afraid. I was filled with rational assertions, and at the same time, I was filled with an infantile fear. I began to breathe deeply as cold perspiration covered my entire body. I had someone unleash on myself a most godful sight, black fleeting shadows jumping all around me, whatever I turned. I closed my eyes and rested my head on an arm of the stuffed chair. I didn't know which way to turn, Don Juan, I said. Tonight you'll have really succeeded in getting me lost. You're being torn by an internal struggle, Don Juan said. Down in the depths of you, you know that you are incapable of refusing the agreement that an indescribable part of you, your glowing code of awareness, is going to serve as an incomprehensible source of nourishment to naturally incomprehensible energies. And another part of you will stand against the situation with all your might. The sorcerer's revolution, he continued, is that they refuse to honor agreements in which they do not participate. No one ever asked me if I could consent to be eaten by beings of different kind of awareness. My parents just brought me into the world to be food, like themselves, and that's the end of the story. Don Juan stood up from his chair and stretched his arms and legs. We have been sitting here for hours. It's time to go into the house. I'm going to eat. Do you want to eat with me? I declined. My stomach was in an uproar. I think you better go to sleep, he said. The blitz has devastated you. I didn't need any further coaxing. I collapsed onto my bed and fell asleep like the dead. At home, at this time went by, the idea of the flyers became one of the main fixations of my life. I got to the point where I felt that Don Juan was absolutely right about them. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't discard his logic. The more I thought about it, and the more I talked to and observed myself and my fellow men, the more intense the conviction that something was rendering us incapable of any activity or any interaction of any thought that didn't have the self as its focal point. My concern, as well as the concern of everyone I knew or talked to, was the self. Since I couldn't find any explanation for such universal homogeny, I believe that Don Juan's line of thought was the most appropriate way of elucidating the phenomenon. I went as deeply as I could into reading about myths and legends. In reading, I experienced something I had never felt before. Each of the books I read was an interpretation of myths and legends. In each one of those books, a homogeneous mind was palpable. The styles differed from the drives behind the words, was homogeneously the same. Even though the theme was something as abstract as myths and legends, the authors always managed to insert statements about themselves. The homogeneous drive behind every one of those books was not the start theme of the book. Instead, it was a self-service. I had never felt this before. I attributed my reaction to Don Juan's influence. The unavoidable question that I posed to myself was, is his influencing me to see this, or is there really a foreign mind dictating everything we do? I lapsed, perforce, into denial again. Something in me knew that whatever Don Juan was driving at was an energetic fact, but something equally important in me knew that all of this was guff. The end result of my internal struggle was a sense of foreboding, the sense of something imminently dangerous coming at me. I made an extensive anthropological inquiries into the subject of flyers in other cultures, but I couldn't find any reference to them anywhere. Don Juan seemed to be the only source of information about this matter. The next time I saw him, I instantly jumped to talk about the flyers. I have tried my best to be rational about the subject matter, I said, but I can't. There are moments when I fully agree with you about the predators. Focus your attention on the fleeting shadows that you actually see, Don Juan said with a smile. I told Don Juan that those fleeting shadows were going to be the end of my rational life. I saw them everywhere since I had left his house. I was incapable of going to sleep in the dark. To sleep was a sight. To sleep with the lights on did not bother me at all. The moment I turned off the lights, however, everything around me began to jump. I never saw complete figures or shapes. All I saw were fleeting black shadows. The flyer's mind has not left you, Don Juan said. It has been seriously injured. It's trying its best to rearrange this relationship with you. But something in you is severed forever. The flyer knows that. The real danger is that the flyer's mind may win by getting you tired and forcing you to quit by playing the contradiction between what you say and what I say. You see, the flyer's mind has no competitors, Don Juan continued. When it proposes something, it agrees with its own proposition, and it makes you believe that you've done something of worth. The flyer's mind will say to you that whatever Don Juan Matty is telling you is pure nonsense, and then at the same time will agree with its own proposition. Yes, of course it is nonsense, you will say. That's the way they overcome us. The flyers are an essential part of the universe, he went on, and they must be taken as what they really are, awesome monsters. They are the means by which the universe tests us. We are energetic probes created by the universe, he continued, as if he were oblivious to my presence. And it is because we are possessors of energy that have awarenesses that we are the means by which the universe becomes aware of itself. Ding, 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 ding. The flyers are the impeccable challengers. They cannot be taken as anything else. If we succeed in doing that, the universe allows us to continue. I wanted Don Juan to say more, but he said only, the blitz ended the last time you were here. There's only so much you could say about the flyers. It's time for another kind of maneuver. I couldn't sleep that night. I fell into a light sleep in the early hours of the morning until Don Juan dragged me out of bed and took me for a hike in the mountains where he lived. The configuration of the land was very different from that of the Sonora Desert, but he told me not to indulge in comparison, that after walking for a quarter of a mile, every place in the world just the same. Sightseeing is for people in cars, he said. They go at great speed without any effort on their part. Sightseeing is not for walkers. For instance, when you are riding in a car, you may see a gigantic mountain whose sight overwhelms you with its beauty. The sight of the same mountain will not overwhelm you in the same sense if you look at it while you're going on foot. It will overwhelm you in a different way, especially if you have to climb it or go around it. It was very hot that morning. We walked on a dry riverbed. One thing that this valley and the Sonora Desert had in common was the millions of insects. The gnats and flies are all around me, were like dive bombers. They aimed at my nostrils, eyes, and ears. Don Juan told me not to pay attention to their buzzing. Don't try to disperse them with your hand, he uttered in a firm tone, and tend them away. Set up an energy barrier around you. Be silent and from your silence, the barrier will constructed. Nobody knows how this is done. It is just one of those things that the old sorcerers called energetic facts. Shut off your interval dialogue. That's all it takes. I want to propose a weird idea to you, Don Juan went on as he kept walking ahead of me. I had to accelerate my steps to be closer to him as to not miss anything he said. I have to stress that it's a weird idea that we find endless resistance in you, he said. I will tell you beforehand what you won't accept it easily, but the fact that it is weird should not be a deterrent. You are a social scientist, therefore your mind is always open to inquiry, isn't that so? Don Juan shamelessly making fun of me, I knew it, but it didn't bother me, perhaps due to the fact that he was walking so fast and I had to make tremendous effort to keep up with him. His sarcasm just sloughed off me, and instead of making me feisty, it made me laugh. My undivided attention was focused on what he was saying, and the insects either stopped bothering me or because I had intended a barrier of energy around me, or because I was so busy listening to Don Juan that I didn't care about the buzzing around me anymore. The weird idea, he said slowly, measuring the effect of his words, is that every human being on this earth seems to have exactly the same reactions, the same thoughts, the same feelings. They seem to respond in more or less the same way to the same stimuli. Those reactions seem to be sort of fogged up by the language they speak, but if we scrape that off, they are exactly the same reactions that besiege every human being on Earth. I would like you to become curious about this as a social scientist, of course, and see if you could formally account for such heterogeneity. Don Juan collected a series of plants. Some of them could hardly be seen. They seem to be more in the realm of algae moss. I held his bag open and we didn't speak anymore. When he had enough plants, he headed back for his house, walking as fast as he could. He said that he wanted to clean and separate those plants and put them in a proper order before they dried up too much. I was deeply involved in thinking about the task he had delineated for me. I began trying to review in my mind if I knew of any articles or papers written on the subject. I thought I would have to research it, and I decided to begin my research by reading all the works available on national character. I got enthusiastic about the topic in a haphazard way, and I really wanted to start from home right away, for I wanted to take his task to heart. But before we reached his house, Don Juan sat down on a high ledge overlooking the valley. He didn't say anything for a while. He was not out of breath. I couldn't conceive of why he had stopped to sit down. The task of the day for you, he said abruptly in a foreboding tone, is one of the most mysterious things of sorcery, something that goes beyond language, beyond explanations. We went for a hike today. We walked because the mystery of sorcery must be cushioned in the mundane. It must stem from nothing and go back again into nothing. That's the art of warriors, travelers, to go through the eye of a needle unnoticed. So brace yourself by the propping your back up against the rock wall, as far possible as from the edge. I will be by you in case you faint or fall down. What are you planning to do, Don Juan? I asked, and my alarm was so patent that I noticed it and lowered my voice. I want you to cross your legs and enter into inner silence, he said. Let's say that you want to find out what articles you could look for to discredit or substantiate what I had asked you to do in your academic milieu. Enter into inner silence, but don't fall asleep. This is not a journey through the dark sea of awareness. This is seeing from inner silence. It was rather difficult for me to enter into inner silence without falling asleep. I fought a nearly inconceivable desire to fall asleep. I succeeded and found myself looking at the bottom of the valley and from an impenetrable darkness around me. And then I saw something that chilled me to the inner marrow of my bones. I saw a gigantic shadow, perhaps 15 feet across, leaping in the air and landing with the silent thud. I felt the thud in my bones, but I didn't hear it. They are really heavy, Don Juan said in my ear. He was holding me by the left arm as hard as he could. I saw something that looked like a mud shadow wiggle on the ground and then take another gigantic leap, perhaps 50 feet long, and land again with the same ominous silent thud. I forgot not to lose my concentration. I was frightened beyond anything I could rationally use as a description. I kept my eyes fixed on jumping shadow on the bottom of the valley. Then I heard the most peculiar buzzing, a mixture of the sound of flapping wings and the buzzing of a radio, whose dial has not quite picked up the frequency of radio station, and the thud that followed was something unforgettable. It shook Don Juan and me to the core. Of a gigantic black mud shadow had just landed by our feet. Don't be frightened, Don Juan said imperiously. Keep your inner silence and it will move away. I was shivering from head to toe. I had the clear knowledge that if I didn't keep my inner silence alive, the mud shadow would cover me up like a blanket and suffocate me. Without losing the darkness around me, I screamed at the top of my voice. Never had I been so angry and utterly frustrated. The mud shadow took another leap clearly to the bottom of the valley. I kept on screaming, shaking my legs, and wanted to shake off whatever might come to eat me. My state of nervousness was so intense that I lost track of time. Perhaps I fainted. When I came to my senses, I was lying in my bed in Don Juan's house. There was a towel soaked in icy cold water wrapped around my forehead. I was burning with fever. One of Don Juan's female cohorts rubbed my back, chest, and forehead with rubbing alcohol, for this did not relieve me. The heat I was experiencing came from within myself. It was wrath and impotence that generated it. Don Juan laughed as if what was happening to me was funniest thing in the world. Pearls of laughter came out of him in an endless barrage. I would never have thought that you would take seeing a flyer so much to heart, he said. He took me by the hand and led me to the back of his house, where he dunked me in a tub of water, fully clothed, shoes, watch, everything. My watch, I screamed. Don Juan twisted with laughter. You shouldn't wear a watch when you come to see me, he said. You fouled up your watch. I took off my watch and put it by the side of the tub. I remembered that it was waterproof and nothing would happen to it. Being dunked in the tub helped me enormously. When Don Juan pulled me out of the freezing water, I had gained a degree of control. That sight is preposterous, I kept repeating, unable to say anything else. The predator Don Juan had described was not something benevolent. It was enormously heavy, gross, and indifferent. I felt its disregard for us. Doubtless, it had crushed us ages ago, making us, as Don Juan had said, weak, vulnerable, and docile. I took off my wet clothes, covered myself up with a poncho, sat in my bed, and invariably wept my head off, but not for myself. I had my wrath, my unbending intent, not to let them eat me. I wept for my fellow men, especially for my father. I never knew until that instant that I loved him so much. He never had a chance, I heard myself repeating over and over, as if the words were not really mine. My poor father, the most considerate being I knew, so tender, so gentle, so helpless. That, my friends, is a journey that all of us are taking right now. All of us are going through this right now without knowing it. Well, some of us do. There are forces beyond us, beyond our vision, beyond our knowing. Some of us are aware of this and some of us are not, that siphon our energy and attack us and do things and say things and put feelings in us in thought form that make us docile and ignorant and believe things that aren't there. This chapter in itself should open up a lot of eyes, because this is really happening in our world right now. And once you become aware of this energy, you have to go through the same extent Carlos is going through in his journey, how to overcome it and how to move it on. So the next chapter I will read next time is starting on the definitive journey. So I hope all of you enjoyed that. Really take it in and really understand where this journey is taking us and put it together. It's becoming aware of things that you're not aware of. It's becoming cognizant and going through a journey of analyzing yourself, going through the dark journey, looking at all the facets of your life, looking at where you went wrong and forgiving it, moving through that, going through this journey and coming to the place where we're at right now. Recognizing the evil and recognizing the things that need for us to be aware of so that we can change it and transmute it to something better, or to at least put our armor of God on. Say adios. Sending each and every one of you love and light. Again, amazing book. Go buy it. Worth every penny. If you have it in your heart to help me, please do so. Love donations are awesome. Hitting the thumbs up, sharing and subscribing to my channel definitely will help me out. I promise you it does. I really do thank everybody who has been helping me and supporting me in any way that you can. It's a blessing and hits me right there. Right there. Have a great time night. Okay, there's my dyslexia right there. Have a good night. If you're in the nighttime, have a good morning, have a good afternoon. I'll see you on the next one, guys. Bye.